I saw him transform into a dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I never dated a man as remarkably muscular as this guy before, so when he told me he had a secret, I thought it involved his diet, or something not legal that he had injected to make his arms bigger or whatever. I never suspected that his secret was that he would turn out to be some kind of a werewolf or a dogman. Now, I normally date nerdy guys. Clark Kent's, but never Superman. That's why when I found myself increasingly drawn toward the most muscular man in my gym, this long-haired, fair-skinned, incredible Hulk with long, shaggy hair, it was an odd experience. Something about this young Tarzan, probably not a day over 23 or 24, fascinated me. And when he asked me out, I didn't really have any option but to say yes. I never suspected he had any sort of dark side whatsoever. I thought he was a pussycat, not a feral canine. And then one day when we were driving to go on a date together, he suddenly started taking calls from his business associates and employees. He had never done that before while we were out together. I had gotten used to his full attention and his complete adoration. Seeing him on the phone with multiple people who depended on his whim for their living demonstrated to me this man's raw power for the first time. It did surprise me, but not that much, since pussycats are predatory animals after all. Boss Tarzan apologized briefly and in a curt fashion, then detailed to me that there was a conflict at an office that he had to go de-escalate. I had the option of being dropped off where we were, or waiting for him in the parking lot in the car when he went inside, or I could tag along with him and possibly meet some of his coworkers and business collaborators, as he termed them. I had been given 3 choices, and it was clear he needed my answer immediately, as he was eyeing me, and not the road. I felt like this was a test, so I answered that I chose the 3rd choice, to tag along. He turned his eyes back to the road, and floored the gas pedal, which jerked me backward in my seat as though we were blasting off into space. Boss Tarzan then dictated my rules of behavior around his associates. I was not to speak to anyone until the crisis was resolved, unless they spoke to me first, and then I was to allow him to answer for me, unless he looked at me as if expecting my reply. When we got to the building, some guy who looked like he had been crying came up and started detailing what was happening inside to the boss. Then the guy stopped talking and looked at me, quizzically. Tarzan turned to me and said, "Stick close, we may need to skedaddle here," and then the weepy guy stopped caring about my presence. We did indeed skedaddle, through hallways, and then into an opened-up area with a high ceiling that was separated by cubicle walls around 5 feet high. People were either running out past us or else lining the outermost wall, staring in shock and horror at a scene unlike any which I'd ever seen in any office in my lifetime. I started stuttering to Boss T that those were werewolves, but when I looked at him, I saw Tarzan's head, and he tore off his shirt like we were in an episode of Baywatch. I guess it should be called Bay at the Moon Watch, because Boss Tarzan sure looked like a 3rd werewolf in that room. His face now looked just as much like a wolf as it did like a human, and I gasped, unable to finish articulating my thought. Tarzan held a clawed, hairy finger to the end of his long canine snout, and I understood he was telling me to shh. I nodded in understanding to this sweet, kind, thoughtful man, who I realized was just as intelligent and civilized, even though he now looked nothing like a man at all. I was never so amazed by any other individual before in my life than I was with that fellow in that instant. And in the next instant he growled like an animal, and he turned and howled out a screaming cry so primal you could imagine it happening back at the dawn of time, before human beings even existed. It was so chilling that I got shivers, and I felt my knees get rubbery. All commotion in the room ceased immediately, and both of the monstrous things fighting in the center of the room stopped moving at once. It was kind of the office worker equivalent of the way that people say crickets and birds and frogs stop making noise when Dogman or Bigfoot walk nearby in the woods. Tarzan the Dogman then charged bipedally at the two hairy creatures, and I got to see them more clearly for a few seconds under the harsh, fluorescent lighting. One of them was like a human version of a German shepherd, or at least his head looked like that. He was dressed in greenish pastels, an old-fashioned Cosby sweater over light green khakis with dark gray loafers. His outfit was torn in multiple places, which is quite sad, because other than those tears, it all looked like a new outfit. His opponent had a head like a short-snouted pug, and seemed to be much older than the other. His suit was ragged all over, but it had no recent-looking tears in it at all. He was the far larger of the two monster-faced office workers. There were papers all around on the floor, and furniture overturned in such a way that it almost looked like an atom bomb had gone off in the epicenter of the battling. With each step my date took toward them, the two furry monster dogmen shrank in both size and attitude. By the time Tarzan stood in front of them, bellowing a sound that contained no words, but plenty of meaning, both figures were fully transformed back into human men. Pathetic, begging, and pleading human men. Both of them now wore very baggy clothing. I hadn't noticed it was tight when they were wolves, but I did notice the bagginess when they were human again. They begged and pleaded with my powerful boyfriend, and he in turn just glared at them and breathed heavily. He seemed to be almost another kind of animal altogether. His back was now about as wide as Montana, and his entire torso was covered in enough fur to make me 2 floor-length coats. It looked soft, too, but this was not a time to try to find out, obviously. So the two men pleaded for a while. Then they started picking up the furniture and paperwork and swearing it wouldn't happen again. Eventually, Tarzan grew tired of them and turned, walking past me and out of that room. I ran after him, trying to keep up. He had warned me that it might get like that. He ducked into a doorway, and as I was about to go inside after him, he emerged wearing a new shirt and asked me if I was ready to go get some lunch with him. He was fully human again, just like that, and he talked a mile a minute about the menu of the place he was taking me to. I got the vibe that he didn't want to discuss business, and at that point, I didn't really understand how or why, but werewolves seemed to be part of his business. Now that we've become closer, he's revealed to me that he's actually some kind of a dogman or werewolf. He's only human part of the time, and he told me that he considers his wolf self to be his true self. The way he put it was, Larry Talbot changes into the Wolfman, with Larry being the real personality. Superman changes into Clark Kent, with Superman being the real personality. Boss Tarzan feels more like Superman. When he's human, he's doing it to get along with other humans. But in reality, he's actually Superman. He's Boss Werewolf, and the human identity is just his disguise. And now I'm torn and I'm scared. He tells me there's no reason to fear his wolf side, but that is just what a wolf in sheep's clothing would say. My life would become really complicated if I were to continue seeing him. In fact, it is already complicated, isn't it? When I first saw him working out across the gym, I read him as an innocent person for some reason. I don't see him that way anymore, but he still has that innocent look about him, and I'm still just as drawn to him as I ever was. It's a purely physical attraction, I keep telling myself, and yet it feels like so much more than that. I don't want to break up with him, but Everyone I ask for advice about this tells me to leave him as quickly and politely as I can. I'm worried that it might already be too late for that, though. I don't just know about his secret. He also revealed information to me about some relatively famous people who are afflicted in a similar way to this handsome young man. And obviously a great number of the workers at his company are as well. The other thing is, I feel like he wants me to become like him. I think he wants me to become a werewolf as well. And I wonder if, when I agreed to go to his office with him that day, I already sealed my fate. I wonder if every person I saw in that office was also one of the walking wolves. Boss T took me to a cabin in the woods last weekend, and it was the greatest weekend of my entire life. We got silly on champagne by the fire, and I finally got to ask him some questions about the werewolf and the transformations back and forth. Well, before I knew it, I was looking at the wolf, and then I was looking at Tarzan again. It was very confusing how fast he could change from one to the other. It made my eyes and my brain tickle. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. I asked him if he could make it happen slower, and he laughed and said something about how it always happens at the same length of time, and that it's up to the perceptual abilities of the perceiver how long the transformation appears to take. I told him that's a load of horse hockey, and then I demanded that he do it again, but slower. Well, he said it hurt to do it slower, and I asked, which is it? That it's up to the perceiver, or that it hurts to do it slower? He said it used to hurt to do it faster, and now it hurts to do it slower. But then he did it anyway. Not much slower, but slow enough that I could see it happen. Sort of. He shut his eyes and looked cranky. When he opened them again, his eyes were glowing, like an off-white light bulb, and I gasped. His face was covered in hair before I noticed the hair had started growing, but I did see the nose tilt upward and extend outward, becoming a large dog snout. It didn't seem painful, but he wasn't really going that slowly. It seemed to me that his transformation seemed to be mainly taking place around his skull, whereas those guys from his office became smaller when they reverted to human form. I wanted to ask him about that, but before he transformed back, I wanted to feel what his fur was like, if it was soft, like it looked. I walked forward quickly and reached out to touch it. He seemed surprised and jerked back away from me. I felt that it had hard and rough edges, which wasn't what I'd been expecting, and in the next moment, the dog's teeth were in my eyes, and his growl was in my ears. I had to focus on reversing my course and moonwalking away, while Boss Tarzan had to pull himself back to being human. I don't want to seem harsh, he told me, beginning to speak even as his mouth was still reverting to human form, but you should never make any quick moves around a wild animal. Then he proceeded to give me a lecture about how he is a werewolf, not a teddy bear, and that it's important to keep a healthy fear of werewolves, even the ones you get close to. That was quite a different speech than the one I got when I first found out about the werewolfism, when he told me that he would never hurt me. Suddenly it was changed to, I'll never hurt you unless you try to touch my fur, which is like moving the basketball hoops or whatever it is that my father always says. It's changing the rules mid-game, and I'm not sure how I could possibly take that as a positive, because it just can't be. Anyway, the one part of his transformation I can never quite see well enough to understand is the way that the ears go from human ears on the sides of his head up to pointed wolf ears on the top of his head. Each time I've seen it happen with Tarzan or any of the others he's brought around to meet me, I never see how that happens. I can only see at the end that the ears once again are either in one place or the other. Last week, one of his female friends asked to meet up with me for lunch, and I said okay. I knew something was up, but I really couldn't guess what. Well, turns out she was there to try to talk me into getting more serious with Tarzan. This surprised me, and when I was a little standoffish about it, she began to pressure me to tell her why I was afraid of taking the relationship to a more serious level. She pointed out that the guy could certainly provide for me, and he's definitely one of the hottest guys I'm ever going to get close to. I said yes, that's true, but I'll get my hand bitten off if I get close enough to touch him. There was a silence, and then this woman told me that she understood. I was afraid of the wolf, not the man. I said he told me to be, so please don't try to talk me out of it. I don't have a death wish. You want me to make a long-term commitment to a guy who is sometimes a monster capable of fighting Frankenstein to a standstill in the old black and white movies. You want me to act like that would be a normal thing to do, right? She didn't say anything. The lady paid our check and she asked me to follow her around to the back of the restaurant. We walked through the kitchen, where everybody seemed to know her by name. We walked out the back and stood by a smelly garbage dumpster. When I was about to ask her what was going on, she was suddenly much taller than me, and she was covered in fur. She had teeth as long as switchblades and probably as sharp. Her breath was in my face, as she literally barked and growled at me. It was terrifying, and I caught the sleeve of my jacket on a jagged metal edge of that smelly dumpster. At once, that wolf woman was human again, apologizing profusely. I was only trying to scare you into peeing your pants. I wasn't trying to tear that sleeve. I'm so sorry. Werewolves have a weird way of thinking. Wait, let's shorten that sentence. Werewolves are weird. Period. So this lady told me that the only reason I'm afraid of Boss Tarzan in his wolf form is because I don't have my own wolf form. She asked me if I thought she could take Tarzan down in her wolf form, and to be honest, I wasn't sure that she couldn't. Her snout and fangs were probably both bigger and longer than his, but don't tell him I said that. I mean, she certainly wouldn't be an easy meal for him. She's right. He would be less likely to go after me if I were feral like him, but we're talking about me ceasing to be human here. This is not something to take lightly. I also don't actually know what is involved, but if it means surgery or blood in any way, then I am out. I'm very squeamish about anything biological. I just try to avoid thinking about it if I can manage. I call it being spiritual, but really, it's just that I have a distaste for the biological. I don't know for certain that this woman is speaking on behalf of my Tarzan boyfriend when she tells me this stuff. For all I know, she's getting me upset about the idea of becoming a werewolf, or becoming married, just so that I'll leave him. Maybe he never said anything at all about me to her. Maybe she just wants him for herself. You know, I'm going to have to talk directly to Boss T about all this to get any straight answers at all, but I better not have that conversation until I've decided how I feel about it. And so I guess I'm writing to you to ask if anyone in your audience has been in this situation, or had a close friend or relative facing this kind of a decision. What did you or they do? And how did that decision turn out? Did they make the right one? Or do they have regrets? I feel like my time is running out, and I'm going to have to take one path or the other very soon. It's a kind of a decision I know I will never be able to turn back from. It's a decision that I will have to live with for the rest of my life. For those of you out there who have never been in a situation like this, how would you go about making the decision that I have to make? I'd appreciate any opinions that people might want to share about the fact that I saw him transform into a dogman. Got too many friends? Want fewer people knocking on your door? What you need is a Scary Stories brand Unwelcome Mat to place outside your residence or domicile. Our grrr model sends the message one way, while our nostalgic warning mat makes it clear the lengths you are willing to go to avoid unwelcome interruptions from pesky humans and their ilk. The Dogman warning also comes in the form of a metal sign, which you can hang any place where you feel that people deserve to know the truth. Links to all three in the description of this video. There, down the road, at the edge of that bridge over White River, the wolf had stood up on its hind legs. Check out our brand new second channel, which will be doing these little short animation things to start with. If the channel builds up, maybe I can do longer episodes over there too. Anyway, the link is in the description if you're interested. The wolf had to be over 10 feet tall. I mean, it was not a man in a costume. I wondered what the heck it was gonna do. And then Julie watches us on Rumble. She's always cool. She never grumbles. She wanted to send a check to Hank. Then she sent us a super thanks. Please join us in thanking today's executive producer, Julie Sadler, for making this episode possible. Julie asked us if we had a snail mail P.O. box address, but sadly, we can only afford to live in the cloud. Since Julie is an angel, she knows all about clouds, and she sent us a really nice donation that way, well above and beyond the call of duty. I think and hope that Julie gets to see our secret uncensored shows. Julie, if you don't, please email us at scarystoriesnyc, all one word, at Gmail, and we'll send you back the links. By the way, this week's new secret uncensored story for members only is about a very different kind of werewolf transformation than we had in this episode. That one is a bit more, biological, I guess you might say. Gory, others might say. There are two images from that, and both are so nasty I can't show you here. Be advised that new episode is pretty harsh, and it is completely uncensored. If that's too much for you, we won't be mad if you skip that story. But if that's something you want to check out, then listen to our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman, as he explains how to become a member. Hank? Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.